This is or episode 3 of the Wrestling Prep podcast here with Carolyn Wester, head coach at Wrestling Prep, and athlete Andrew Morgan. And I know, Carolyn, you were just at a clinic. I know you're headed up to Montana next week, but earlier this week you were down in Los Angeles at a clinic, and I know
Sure.
you wanted to talk a little bit about your experience there. So tell us about your trip in the clinic.
Well, it was a great experience. I was out there specifically brought originally to work with a family's athlete, which I'm available to do, but I always feel so bad, so costly for them. But anyway, in that whole process, Luke had reached out to me, Rockhold, and had seen that I was going to be in Los Angeles, and he wanted me to come down and work with him and Cheeto Vera. Luke's got in a karate combat. He's got an upcoming fight, and Cheeto is fighting on August 3rd against Figueiredo. So they were both in full gear and experience. And then I went to the Los Angeles Wrestling Club, and the coach there, Vlad, who's from the Ukraine, probably in his late 30s, was clearly an exceptional coach. And we had a big turnout, and there were a lot of people there who felt like they knew me already, right? They were really excited for me to be there, but when they would talk to me, they would always begin with a stereotypical comment. You're the body leveraging lady. You're the sequencing lady. You're
Hmm.
the whatever. And of course, I don't say anything differently, but ironically, during the Q&A session, which was very extensive, the one athlete gentleman, adult, said, um, when you're done doing what you do, who actually teaches them the technique? And I said, actually, I am 99% more competent at the intricacies of technique, effective technique, and teaching technique than I am in teaching muscle order or how to use your body. And their question was immediately, why don't you do that first? I said, because it's irrelevant. In most cases, I'm going to help more people get better at wrestling if they know how to use their bodies
Hmm.
than I am teaching them, how to transition from a headlock to back points, right? That's not the case. If they can't use their body correctly, the
Right.
intricacies of what makes it different, I mean, what makes it effective is muted or unavailable to the
Right.
athlete.
Yeah, that's kind of like we talked about last week, almost building the base of the pyramid, right? The larger the base you have, the more movement capabilities you have, then your technique is
Well,
you can
well, I
grow
think I want
much
to.
more
I
onto
think I,
that.
wa- I think I want to take that a little bit further, right? So,
Okay.
yeah, for sure the base and then the technique. But what I thought we should talk about, and I was hoping Drew would chime
Hmm.
in on, is the delicacy and the differential between technique of someone who spends a large amount of time with me, so I can teach it to them, and
Right.
then how they end up using that and how that spans their career, and
Okay.
why it's important. I think if somebody sees body leveraging or muscle sequencing as the beginning step for what their athlete wants, but the fine details of technique and what technique actually works against the best math-based body position, because that's in my statement, my hypothesis every
Mhm.
time. I'm going to teach movement to your athlete and sequencing that's going to work in the technique that beats the best math-based body position. And it's that teaching, what is that technique, that very detailed technique that I feel is my strong suit, and my
Okay.
ability to see it and dissect it and then explain it and have it be effective.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Almost how I think of it too is, and maybe this is just kind of how I learned it and stuff, being able, coming for just at camp at first and not being able to spend as much time. I feel like to pick up the technique that Carolyn teaches, because like she said, and I mean, I can attest, it's extensive technique that she has and, all, I guess, different positions, those common wrestling positions. She has, a technique or a way out or a movement that can follow, just like any other coach would. But in her case, with the body leveraging and muscle sequencing, you need that base that she teaches so you could understand her vernacular so that when she goes into the specific technique or a specific position, you can pick up kind of what she's saying, because she's not going to change her vocab and the way she teaches for other people. You know, if they're a high level wrestler, she might try to bring it down to their level, and they can usually come up and match because
Right.
they're high level wrestler. They've been around the sport for a long time and they understand their body. So I've seen a lot of people can catch on really quick, but she's not going to do that. You know, she's not going to come all the way down to just teach the technique. She wants you to understand at least the reason why you're doing this muscle order. So then when it does come to technique, A, you're not resistant against it because you understand it's more effective and you can feel it. Most people can feel how much more effective it is. And then she can just kind of go into the technique for that position because you can follow along. That's kind of how I think of it. So like, that's why for me now, when she does, you know, something new she's been working on, or I have a question when I was competing about this position or whatever, we could just start in that position and work on it for an hour or however long we had, because I understood the terms she was using. I understood the body mechanics. Maybe I couldn't do it properly right away, but I could at least conceptualize it and input it into my practice. And then obviously over time, build the muscle memory and become proficient in that position or that skill or technique, whatever we were working on that day.
Yeah, I want to say too that I just had this conversation with my the athletes in Northern Virginia who come and wrestle on Sunday mornings with me when I'm in town. I was a little frustrated because they weren't executing their body leveraging and some of the new parts of it efficiently and in a time sensitive manner. And I said, I want to teach you more things, but I can't until you decide to do this well, because you will not be able to execute it. It's enormously frustrating in MMA. I'm sure in jiu-jitsu now that I'm getting involved, but in wrestling, to go to places and tournaments where you could see people sit next to me and say, what should that happen? What should be happening there? Or how should they be doing? What technique should they be doing? I'm like, it doesn't matter because they're not capable. And I was recently with Cordell Robinson from Wyoming Seminary, and we were watching some collegiate duel, and the other adults in the room, men, were saying, "How I can't get out of that." He goes, "Oh, watch Carolyn. What should they do there?" I was like, one, they should never be in that position because they should have executed this technique prior, but this would be the technique and how you would execute it to, you know, get out of it. And in fact, people like Cordell Robinson, when I'm in their rooms, his interest is not for me to teach something, a big concept, because most of those athletes, you know, you've got Busakis, Desmond, all the guys that are still, you know, still at SEM that are coming back through, Dale Corbin, Ashton, I can't think of him, Ashton Bacon, those guys, Asher Bacon, those guys, they're not looking to apply a big concept to something in their overall wrestling in that environment. They want to know the exact technique to get out. So sometimes Cornell will have a list of questions, and all I do is show them the technique to execute and to get out of the situation. And then you want to try to explain the technique that would keep them from getting in the situation. You know, Cornell will grasp it because he's known me a long time, but only the kids that are in the room who've known me a long time understand how to prevent it. And that's, you know, that's super frustrating. That drives me to make body leveraging, but my interest, you know, is in executing technique, is the intricacies and details of technique.
Well, jumping right off that, I mean, that's where I kind of learned the most right away, and where I think Carolyn's way of teaching and body leveraging and all that clicked right away, is because of that exact thing, that question and answer concept. I mean, for me, I mean, I've explained it to her and when we've talked, but I only came for a week the first summer I came, and, you know, was a decent wrestler for Southern California. Like I placed at whatever the CI, one of the qualifying tournaments and stuff, and there's a lot of wrestlers there, but I hadn't qualified for state, nothing big yet.
Right.
But to me, it was obviously the body leveraging, and I was like, oh, I could see like this is very challenging. And I'm obviously like super sore. So like clearly something's going on here. But for me, it was the question and answer where I was like, kids would ask questions like, basically, oh, why is the 90-degree better in the tripod, just for an example.
Right.
And we would just workshop it kind of in front of 100 kids or however many were there. And then to me, I'm just go, oh, it makes sense. Like the technique of that, along with the math, because she would explain it in her terms, just clicked for me. So then for me, every, new week I came or from the years on, it was like the new stuff she was working on. And I think that's where too, it ties into what she was saying earlier. Like, for example, I don't know, was it 2015, 16? You started doing like human geometry and stuff like that?
Yes, it
Working
was the
on,
first year we were in El Dorado, because
which
I
just,
remember it was 215.
yeah, which it's a form of like in wrestling terms, shot recovery, I
Right.
guess, which
Yeah.
you're shooting through people. It's hard to conceptualize verbally, at least for me. She could do it better. But anyway, she was starting to show this, and obviously me not being able to train with her year round. And I was body leveraging when I could in my spare time, but with college and with everything, I wasn't
Right.
keeping up as much as I would have liked. And so when I would come back, these kids that had been training with her for a long time, high school kids, would be leaps ahead in that specific technique that she was working on. And for me, it took me a long time to really start to catch on to it and understand its effectiveness because I just couldn't get my body in the right position to execute because I wasn't doing the body leveraging and stuff. So I think it's easy for people to dismiss her technique necessarily, or maybe not dismiss, but they just go, oh, that's not going to work for me. It's not effective. When it is effective, it's just you're not used to putting your body in
Right.
those right math-based positions, which, like she said, that right math-based position is going to work against people that are also in the best math-based position, which as you get more proficient in the sport and reach a higher level, almost everyone is naturally in a good math-based position because they've found out through trial and error that that's the most effective, whether it was taught to them or not. And so for me, that it would take me, a long time to catch up to the technique because I would have to use those summers, those weeks, a month, whatever I was training with her to catch up. So I distinctly remember it took me probably like 3 to 4-ish years of training over the summer to really catch on to specifically that human geometry movement. I caught on a lot of other stuff quicker, but it took me till my senior year of college to start actually hitting human geometry in matches. And
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were key matches. When
Mhm.
there were key matches, I remember one was against Zaid Valencia.
Yeah. I
One
saw
was
that match.
when was it an App State athlete you were winning
That was
wrestling
one,
in
yeah.
the conference? I mean, there's 1,000 times, but what's so interesting back to the previous part of this conversation was, and I think you might have been at the clinic, Bryce, I did in Glendale at Fight Ready
Yep.
after UFC Glendale. So when we, I think I've told the story, Cejudo Henry, Angel is the one who was the Carolyn fan, and
Yeah.
Henry
Yeah.
was, reticent to be
Like not at
excited
first. Yeah.
about the white woman coach who'd never wrestled. And anyway, it didn't take very long and he jumped into it. But when I was teaching human geometry for shot recovery, like you're describing, Drew, the next day, Henry put it on BJJ Fanatics. Like he, like he had invented it. It was so funny because Andres Gandara and about 20 people reached out to me because I'm not really on BJJ Fanatics, had reached out to me. And I'm like, Henry, you're going to have to, if you would please, you know, be a
Not
little more direct about that. Right. So anyway, but that's the truth. Someone who's already a great wrestler.
Right.
Henry got it in a millisecond.
Mhm.
He's like, oh, this is going to make a huge difference. But there's so much left of technique to be taught for wrestling because right now the funnel for technique is very limited because of the basic positions that athletes are taught to wrestle with from the beginning.
Right.
So,
Right.
the big things like being able to hand fight from neutral, and some of these things are it narrows the technique that somebody
Right.
can do effectively because there's a presumption there where they can start from, how they can be effective. The first thing a lot of the coaches yell when they're little is tie up or snap,
Yeah.
snap and there's just very little math-based engineered proficient structures being built. Athletes aren't taught, a wide array of positions that they could be effective from. I'm not dismissing the need to hand fight.
Right.
Anybody who's been to practice with me knows I love to that I'm anxious to hand fight, that it's fun for me because I know that the technique I use for hand fighting is going to put a hurt on most people, at least for a second or two, enough for me to do what I want to do next. But that's part of the problem, is that technique in and of itself is minimalized in terms of what's actually available that someone could possibly do with their
That's an
body.
interesting way to put it. We kind of do put guardrails on what we
That's
think of
better.
as put possible uh, technique, just because these are the positions we typically find ourselves in. So we need to have technique for those positions, but we almost limit we put blinders onto the fact that we're never going to be out of those positions. And but we talk. I know Drew had mentioned some of the human geometry stuff. I know when we teach the split shot, which is a different way to shoot than is typically taught to most beginning wrestlers. A lot of wrestlers are very uncomfortable in that position where their legs are split. It's very common in high level wrestling now. It didn't used to be, but we have to allow our kids
As Mr. Bartlett said to me at Big Ten, you have, it's pervasive now. You can see.
But at first, that position's uncomfortable and you feel unstable, and it's because athletes don't spend a lot of time there, and so the more time they spend there, the more strength they develop in that end range, the more comfortable they feel they can actually wrestle from what is objectively a better position, because they spend enough time there, they feel comfortable. It takes time, as Drew was saying, to kind of get that back or
Well,
get into that.
it's interesting also too, because what a lot of people will say to me is in passing, like a dad, well, my kid has been in gymnastics since they were 3, and that's what the Russians do. That is correct. The Russians for sure use some form of muscle order through gymnastics, which I believe they teach differently. I think Americans watch it and in their mind they're replicating the shape, therefore they think they've replicated the torque and force. But the difference is the technique and the order in which they teach technique in some of these other countries is different than America. I think because in countries like Russia, there's not this massive club system of these very gracious people giving their time, who then become competitive within there. So they start to focus on winning and losing at the lowest levels. In the number of social media posts about the elementary school win, or 15-time Tulsa champ, or all that kind of stuff. But in these other countries,
And under rankings,
they're not doing that. They're not trying to,
right.
They're trying to make them better wrestlers. They're not trying to win competition. And I think that in America has slowed American wrestling and ability to have even more diverse technique. It has slowed it way down.
That's
So it's
that's
almost,
exactly what I was going to say. Honestly, right before you guys kind of got on a different tangent, brought it back, I was going to mention this exactly. I think that's why a lot of people are kind of risk adverse necessarily to Carolyn's technique, is I think because they're taught so long when they're young, because a lot of kids that are good get in the sport at a young age. They're taught these like technique from positions they get in because they're being taught, like Carolyn said, not to lose. So instead of like trying to focus on being in the best body position, and maybe because you're young and it's hard to focus on being taught a full muscle sequence, you're getting beat, people gravitate toward like, hey, let's reach on this leg and get super extended single and then learn how to finish from there, because we can teach that when you're 6 years old. It's easier. And kids, don't know how to sprawl properly or like put weight on top of you. So if you have any sort of pull, you'll probably score at a young age, right? And then I think, like Carolyn said, that develops, as you get older. And then by the time you're 15, 16, 17 and results start kind of mattering because you want to go to college, that's all you know. And that, I mean, that's why you see so many people with hurt shoulders and hurt this and hurt that, because it's just so much wear and tear, which is going to happen in the sport, whether you're in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, 100 years. It's just so much wear and tear. perfect math-based position or not, injuries will happen, but nowhere near at the rate or as early because we don't have kids in these poor positions. And I think it ties right into what she was saying in these other countries and stuff. You see them, right? We might kill people at the cadet level, especially as of recently. I feel like our
Yeah.
kids are very high level at a young age, but it really evens out, even almost by junior level, which is only what, 2, 3 years later. Um, and I feel like that's kind of to Carolyn's point when the Russian system, all those, kind of Soviet bloc countries, their system starts to really click. Japan, I mean, all these countries, like their system starts to click when people hit 19, 20. And then it really evens out on the senior level, obviously.
Two things. One, right away, you're talking about Japan. Let's talk about China and how well China's wrestling team just recently did. And about 8, 9 months ago, they brought in an American to become their strength and conditioning trainer who grew up at Wrestling Prep.
Huh.
Morgan Flaherty.
Yeah.
Morgan Flaherty, he's been out at the OTC for years, and they've utilized him some. And China's just had this huge gap. Am I saying that Morgan Flaherty's lifting techniques and what he's doing is, he and I got together and thought about all that? Definitely not. But Morgan spent a large part his entire high school career and went off to UC Davis where they dropped the program at Wrestling Prep. You both know him.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you both met him, and he is now, because what he sees is a little different, and it's being accepted in China, and I don't think it ever has been implemented and accepted in Colorado Springs, and he's been a Colorado Springs resident, I would guess, for maybe 8, 9 years. The other point I want to talk about is susceptibility. The United States, when we talk about the susceptibility of athletes here not to have as great of technique or know as many things as other countries do, and because of the nature of the club structure and other components in the United States, I think we're not the first people to see this, not just in wrestling, but America's is susceptible in many sports, and also in many things, because our country has a much larger drive toward what other people think of us and presenting an image and being seen a certain way, which is completely verified by the 2011 to current relationships I've had with the Dagestanis. They don't care what anybody thinks ever, and nothing
Yeah.
in their life is driven by that. And here, when I was down at when I went over to meet Luke, and then Cheeto came and others, they weren't worried about anything except being better at fighting. They didn't care. I mean, I've got the video. Cheeto said I'm welcome to post it. I'm going to send it to him first, of them doing rudimentary body leveraging movement, and Ian and Joshua are doing it. They're doing it. And then we're applying it to technique that was relevant for Cheeto. And he was like, this is, and then his coach, Danny, one of his coaches for wrestling, Danny, was there. And they're all, watching, and Danny's we're in a boxing ring, and they're all getting it. And they get that the intricacy of the detail of technique that's available to them from the way I see things, the way my mind works, was greatly beneficial for them.
Yeah, I think, and you've used the word detail a few times as we've been talking as well, and I think that makes the mark of when I see wrestlers and coaches, and Drew can maybe speak to this too, because you've probably been taught technique from a lot of different coaches throughout your career.
A lot of great coaches.
Yeah, the level of detail I think is more appreciated by the athlete the longer they're in the sport, and because a lot of the technique has similarities, but a lot of coaches sort of start with the end product and then work their way backwards, but never actually get to the point where they're talking about this is where your foot needs to be, this is where your hand needs to be, your wrist should be straight here, this muscle should be contracting here, your knee should be exactly in this position. If you roll over a lot of those details and don't emphasize the little things, then the move, as Carolyn has said a couple of times here, it might look the same, but those details are what actually make that technique successful. And I've been in a lot of clinics as well where, uh, you know, instructors will teach a technique, but they'll start from the end point and never actually work back to the little things that make the technique work. Where I think Carolyn kind of, certainly there's a focus on the end product, but the way to get there is to start by doing the little things right.
Oh, I agree completely. I mean, the details are like what make all the difference in my mind. I mean, being around very high level wrestlers, being coached by very high level wrestlers, I've picked up a lot of these little details, whether it's just one tiny tidbit they use. And usually I can pinpoint the math-based movement in it, or at least the structure. You know, a lot of the time, like they're doing it, they just don't, like I said, use the same vernacular as Carolyn, but the movement is there. You know, they have the 90-degree angle, their wrist is straight when they're doing it. They just do it naturally, like I said, because it's the most efficient, and gets the job done, right? The best. And they've done it thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of times, right? So for me, like I'm able to pick up these details and incorporate it in my own wrestling, or I'm able to teach it. And I mean, that's what kind of drives me crazy about trying to coach other people and stuff, is them not realizing the importance of these details. Because when you're
Right.
in a high level room with, you know, Luke Rock, Cold Cheeto Vera, like people that are getting paid millions of dollars to do their sport, or wrestlers that are trying to win an Olympic gold medal, that's the stuff they talk about.
Mhm.
They don't talk about, you know, high C, fake single. Like, yeah, that stuff might come up, whatever, but like they're focused more on that intricate, okay, I'm already in on the leg. I've gotten here thousands of times in my career, but I can't finish it. Or I finish only 50% of the time. And when I wrestle other world-class level guys at my weight, it's 25%. How
Right.
do I fix it? And then, like you said, they're focused on they scale it back to my hand in the right spot, my knee, my wrist is straight, I'm grabbing at this spot. And that's the stuff I pick up, you know, being in these rooms now. So it drives me a little crazy trying to coach younger kids and stuff, which I get, they're young. I understand. I probably would have been the same way, but they don't capitalize on these important details, or you show them 2, 3, 4 times and they still don't do it. And I just want to lose it a little bit, because I'm like, no, you're skipping. That's the most important part, is
That's-
Oh,
keeping a straight wrist when you grab that ankle, because now they can't move, right?
right. Right.
Little stuff like that.
I remember the first time I was in, I went up to Cornell. Drew wasn't with me, it was before Drew was there. I went up to Cornell at Rob Cole's invitation to help acclimate Josh Saunders his freshman year, or his first year as a frog, or whatever he was doing. And he was struggling immensely. And it was in the middle of COVID, and there were protocols, it was hard to practice. And I'm in this space, and it's Kyle Dake, Mike Gray, Yanni is over to the right. Julian Ramirez is the workout partner. Somebody else, one of the deans, Gabe. Gabe, is that right?
Probably Gabe.
Gabe's there. And that's where I was the most comfortable, because most comfortable knowing I'd be effective. I can go in some room and they'll just be unexperienced at that level, coaches and dads and moms, and they just are so dismissive. And here, I asked permission, may I? And they're like, yes, coach, go right ahead. And I was just helping Josh translate the technique that Coach Gray wanted him to do. And Coach Gray has a short torso and a long body, and Josh has a long body and short legs. So the actual steps of the technique have to be slightly different to achieve the outcome that Coach Gray was asking for. And so when I did that later, I did not know Coach Gray or at all. I knew a lot of the athletes in the room at Cordell, but I didn't know Coach Gray. And afterwards, Josh's father sent me, a little clip of a screenshot from Coach Gray, and he was discussing Josh. He says, but the great news is that she is a great coach. And that, to me, Mike Gray is a master, I think Drew would say too, a master technician.
Oh yeah.
And just the fact that being around them for less than 20 minutes in a room, I could bark out the technique to Josh in a vernacular he understands. And without him, he's not worried about what I think of him. So, but that to me was indicative. I wish I could spend all my time in rooms and situations like that. That's the allure of the fighting, is that I'm with really top end athletes who immediately grasp. I go in the UFCPI and it's almost, I get upstairs on the second floor and I start helping someone and people are coming over and wanting my input on technique for striking and all kinds of things. So I know that is my strength, and Javier Mendez has called that out, and I'm really looking forward to trying to spend, or not trying, but organizing what I'm doing as a coach to have more time working with athletes who want to take to the next step, not just the basic stuff.
Yeah, and one of the things I've noticed as a coach for, gosh, it's been about 20 years now, watching wrestling tournaments and duels, and you can tell a lot about a coach by how they coach from the corner as well. I sit with one of my buddies, Gordo, and we kind of watch other coaches and kind of critique ourselves as well while we're sitting next to each other. Is that a lot of coaches very passionately will yell out the outcome they want to see. So, they're wrestlers on their back. They're just yelling, "Get off your back," or they're yelling, "Shoot." Very, they're not telling the wrestler how to get there. They're just telling them the outcome they need to see. But I know you and a lot of other coaches I respect start very small, and you're almost muscle contraction by muscle contraction, instructing your wrestler or your fighter this is the little thing I need you to do now to improve your position to get to where we want to get. I know you're on your back. I know you're trying to get off your back, but as a coach, you should be there, not telling them what the outcome they need to achieve, but how to get there. And so the little details, and we've been talking about some of these details and the importance of them of today. But as a coach in the corner, especially in the heat of a match, that the wrestler doesn't need to hear that they need to get off their back. They're fully aware that that's not a good position to be in. But how they need to be, where they put their heel, where their arm goes, how all of those little things. And I know whenever I've seen you coach or even listen to you corner a fighter, it's always very specific details as to how they should be moving, what position they should be, what the very next thing is that's going to get them to the position that's going to help them to be successful, which is a lot different as a coach than just yelling things that seem to be encouraging. But I think a lot of coaches in the corner seem to be doing it to make sure the rest of the gym knows that what is happening out there isn't their fault. Instead of helping the
Well,
wrestler with these small details that you're so concerned about all the time.
I think I can't tell you the number of times. One was at Flow Nationals with Israel Saavedra, was a freshman. What was that coach's name? He used to be at Calvary Chapel. Do you remember? Carmen. Yeah,
Yeah.
Jake Harmon, Alex Cisneros, and everybody was there. My nephew was on the team. We're at Drexel. And Jake Harmon kept stepping in front of me. I was in the corner with maybe Ian Shaw, and he kept stepping in front of me. And Israel came over and goes, "I can't hear my coach." And afterwards, Jake asked him, or someone asked Israel, he said, "Well, I don't understand what she's saying." He goes, "But I do. And when she tells me where to put my body, I know what technique I can execute from there. But the whole time I don't have my body in that position, my brain and body is not feeling like I could execute that." I mean, we even had that one time in the corner for Alejandro. It was me, Javi, and Habib. And if you know Alejandro, Drew knows Alejandro well. Alejandro is a big-hearted, soulful person, and he sees everything that everybody has and just wants to take the best from everyone. So Habib is yelling out general encouragement, and Javi said he needs to be able to hear her.
Yeah.
you know, because you know what I'm saying. So I think there's I think there's a lot of truth to that, and it's people who hear me corner, they wonder what I'm saying, and they think it's just the body leverage and movement. But all athletes who've worked with me know what they can execute from there because they feel it. They get in that spot. Because when we teach, we don't just teach by movement. Like I might do one clinic for 2 hours. What am I supposed to say? I've got 19 years in an ever evolving brain concept of what's going on. I can't teach it then. But when you come and train for a period of time, it's the movement and here's all the technique that goes with it. But the technique is endless to me. The more somebody starts to grasp it, the more I can teach them. I see it. It's almost painful to be places and in tournaments or in fights. I just have to go, like I could get frustrated with them watching people, but they're not even close to knowing what they're really capable of or what's really possible in terms of technique.
Right, right. Those little adjustments, little things matter, and a lot of us, go through our careers not really knowing that small difference is going to make a huge difference in the outcome. So yeah, details certainly matter. All right. Well, I saw you were is it Montana is up on the
Yes,
schedule
sir.
next or early
Yeah,
next week.
we
So
got in this morning at 3 a.m. and then we leave for Montana in 2 days on Sunday, I think around 11. And then
okay.
this
All
will be
right.
the fourth camp we've done in Montana. It's a great experience.
That sounds like
People are
fun.
interested, they're active, people fly in from all over the West Coast. The community, the wrestling community there that Sean Hungerford knows, and Sam Beckett have put together, which, Ryan Henry, I think, was the sort of the initial person, but what they put together is a fundraising, supportive, take these athletes everywhere, coach them constantly as much as they want, and invest in every person who wants to participate regardless of their performance in tournaments.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. All right. Well, we'll hear a little more about that next week. We'll be back for another conversation with Carolyn and Drew. But we'll see you then. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.